Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving right into what is easily the most consequential, most misunderstood, and honestly, the most profoundly tragic historical event in the entire Stormlight Archive. We're talking about the Recreance. For thousands of years, this single event has literally shaped the culture, the endless wars, and the very magic of Roshar. It's this massive, defining shadow hanging right over our current generation of heroes. But here's the catch. The history that the world actually knows about it is fundamentally, completely wrong. So, let's look at how the modern people of Roshar, specifically those who follow Vorinism, actually view this event. It's perfectly summed up in this quote. "Doesn't it bother you at all that the Radiance betrayed us?" For 2 millennia, the accepted historical view has been incredibly simple and, frankly, incredibly harsh. The story goes that the Knights Radiant, these legendary protectors of humanity, just became corrupt, power-hungry cowards. Supposedly, at the end of the Desolations, they simply betrayed mankind to the Voidbringers and vanished, leaving behind their magical shard blades to be fought over by kings and high princes. Thanks to over 2,000 years of lost records and heavy religious dogma, this incredibly complex tragedy was completely twisted into a simple, straightforward tale of cowardice.
But when you actually sit down and think about it, that Vorin narrative makes absolutely no sense. Which brings us to the central mystery of our explainer today. Why would the Knights Radiant willingly abandon their powers, their sacred ideals, and the Spren they were intimately bonded to? I mean, we're talking about thousands of the most powerful, disciplined, and honorable warriors on the entire planet. They didn't just slowly fade away. They orchestrated a mass, simultaneous abandonment. They literally laid down their weapons, turned their backs, and walked away from absolutely everything they were. To even begin to understand why they did this, we have to look at who these people actually were before they quit.
Part 1. The Ancient Knights Radiance. Let's peel back the layers of myth here and look at the sheer weight of what these ancient heroes were actually walking away from. And it starts with the very source of their power, the nail bond. You see, this wasn't just some magical transactional contract. It was a deeply symbiotic, spiritual connection. A sentient Spren would literally fill the broken cracks in a human soul web. Their magic was entirely dependent on this profound, incredibly intimate bond. The Radiants and their Spren were partners in the truest sense of the word. Together, humans and Spren formed the 10 Radiant Orders, which were distinct factions united by unique oaths and a shared purpose. When you grasp that level of connection, the idea of a sudden betrayal seems utterly incomprehensible. And we have to talk about what this nail bond actually grants. Surgebinding. Fueled by Stormlight, Surgebinding is an immense, world-altering magic system. It lets you control gravity, friction, transformation, illusion. We are talking about the kind of raw power that can level entire cities and reshape battlefields in an instant. So giving this up? It wasn't just throwing away a really good sword. It was voluntarily giving up godlike influence over the physical realm. Finally, to really understand their burden, we have to remember the Oathpact. This was a binding, cosmic agreement between the god Honor and the 10 heralds to seal the god Odium and his forces away on the neighboring planet of Braze. The Knights Radiant were founded specifically to fight in the Desolations, these endless, brutal cycles of war that exploded onto the planet whenever that Oathpact temporarily failed and Odium's forces returned. The Radiants were the ultimate frontline defenders of humanity. They existed purely to protect. So what on earth could possibly compel the ultimate protectors to just lay down their arms? Section 2. The True History of Roshar. To solve the mystery of the Recreance, we have to shift our focus to some staggering historical truths that were completely hidden from the modern people of Roshar. You see, the Radiants didn't break because they were cowards. They broke because of a horrifying discovery. First off, humans are not native to Roshar. They originally came from a neighboring planet called Ashen, known in myth as the Tranquiline Halls. But humans destroyed Ashen using the unchecked magic of Surgebinding. They had to flee to Roshar as refugees. The native inhabitants, the Singers, actually welcomed them, but eventually terrible conflict erupted. And here's the kicker. The god Odium, the very force that humans brought with them, ended up siding with the native Singers against the humans. The Voidbringers weren't some alien monsters. Originally, the humans themselves were the invading Voidbringers who ruined their first world. Section 3. The Tragic Choice.
Now, this historical bombshell sets the stage for a terrible, morally ambiguous trolley problem. When the ancient Knights Radiant finally uncovered the truth about their ancestors, they were faced with a devastating realization that completely shattered their foundation. They discovered that their own Surgebinding, their Nahal bonds, and the very magic they used to protect the world was slowly consuming the spiritual essence of Roshar. It was an exact mirror image of the process that had completely destroyed their original home planet of Ashen. Every single time they used their powers to fight a desolation, they were actively bleeding the planet dry. The magic meant to save the world was actually killing it.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the tragic irony of the Recreance. Faced with the awful knowledge that their powers would eventually destroy Roshar, the Radiants decided to make the ultimate silent sacrifice. To save the planet, they agreed to immediately break their oaths and abandon their magic forever. They fully accepted that history would brand them as cowardly traitors. They took the hit, but their sacrifice went horribly, horribly wrong. Instead of a peaceful resolution, they unintentionally triggered a brand new catastrophe, the Deadeyes. Section 4, the Deadeye Catastrophe. So what exactly went wrong when they gave up their powers? Well, for thousands of years, everyone just assumed the Radiants callously murdered their Spren. But the absolute most crucial point here is that the Spren were in on it. Prior to the Recreance, safely breaking a Radiant oath did not cause permanent death. It caused temporary pain for a Spren, kind of like taking physical damage, but they would always eventually recover. When the ancient Radiants made their terrible choice, their Spren mutually agreed to the plan. They expected a period of pain and sorrow. They absolutely did not expect to have their eyes scratched out and their minds lobotomized into permanent Deadeyes. Those abandoned Shardblades, they were never meant to be corpses. So why did they die? To understand this, we need to quickly separate confirmed canon from reasonable theory regarding an entity named Bado Mishram. Canonically, Bado Mishram was a powerful unmade who gave the singers forms of power during the False Desolation. Also canonically, a bondsmith imprisoned her in a gemstone to stop the war, which inadvertently lobotomized the singers into mindless slave form. Now here is the prevailing and frankly fascinating theory. Imprisoning a being that deeply connected to the planet fundamentally damaged Roshar's overall spirit web. Because the planet's underlying magical plumbing was broken, the natural process of a Spren safely decoupling from a human was violently interrupted. The Spren essentially got trapped mid-transformation. The Recreance itself didn't kill the Spren. It was the prior imprisonment of Bado Mishram that ensured breaking an oath would suddenly become a lethal, irreversible act. Section 5. The Modern Radiance Burviv. You see, the Recreance isn't just some dusty, ancient history. It is a heavy, living trauma that deeply impacts our current cast of characters right now, as they attempt to reform the Orders. Dalinar Kholin is bearing the immense psychological weight of uncovering this true, horrifying history through his visions. Kaladin and Shallan must somehow navigate their own fragile Nahal bonds, knowing full well that their ancient predecessors, people who were just as honorable as them, chose to abandon this exact magic. But perhaps the most fascinating development is Adolin Kholin. Adolin isn't even a Radiant, but he's attempting something totally unprecedented with his Deadeye's sword, Maya. By fiercely offering his own strength to her, he seems to be forging a sort of reverse Nahal bond, filling in the cracks in her soul web in a desperate bid to heal the unhealable wounds of the Recreance. And that leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought. The ancient Knights Radiant were faced with an impossible trolley problem, and their honorable sacrifice resulted in a catastrophic tragedy that literally broke the magic of the world. Now Dalinar, Kaladin, Shallan, and Adolin have inherited both the incredible power and the massive existential threat that broke their ancestors. Armed with the terrifying truth of Ashen, the brutal reality of the Deadeyes, and the ever-looming threat of Odium, can this new generation of Radiants find a third path? Can they somehow succeed where the ancient heroes tragically and perhaps inevitably broke? It's a question that redefines absolutely everything we thought we knew about Roshar. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and remember, always question the history you're told.